Welcome. It's Facts You Don't Know. If it's your first time here and you want to find out new facts that will definitely make you smarter and more, well, and first make sure to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything.
Is this the story that proves that water is thicker than blood? She was given an idyllic childhood by her adoring adoptive parents. Yet they were rejected by Kaylee because of the mother who found her on Facebook. Kaylee Marie Watts grew up in the heart of the English countryside, playing in the fields and riding horses, enjoying what sounds like a perfect childhood, especially since she was taken care of by social services at the age of 5 because of her parents' violent, dysfunctional relationship. She would have seemed to be one of the luckiest ones of the 90,000 British children languishing in the care system. Kaylee was placed with a foster family after her hard start in life, who were so smitten with the blonde, blue-eyed youngster that they adopted her. She moved to a cozy cottage in Worcestershire instead of being raised in institutions and settled into family life with Len and Monica Watts, then in their 40s, and their elderly adopted son, Mark, 11. The couple, incapable of having their own children, were thrilled. They had fulfilled their dream. They tried to have kids for many years, but ultimately they had to accept it was not meant to be. I'm sure it was very difficult for them, but they really didn't like talking to us about it, says Kaylee, now 22. Settled at the village primary school and reveling in the undivided attention of her parents, Kaylee was thriving as a young woman. Little was said about the early years of her life, although she knew that Thomas was her surname. Her parents quietly battled away any questions, and soon she learned not to ask questions about her birth family. I think we gave them something they were really missing when Mark and I came along, says Kaylee. It gave it to all of us, and it was great fun. I could not have asked for more as a small child. The family was supported by Len, a welder, as Monica had given up her nursing job to fulfill her motherhood dream. She would help them with homework and took great pleasure in cooking for the family, always there for the kids after school. Len was head of the household, though equally devoted. His word was law, and at times Kaylee was happy to know where she stood after experiencing the chaos of children's homes. So why then was she contacted on Facebook 5 months ago by the birth mother who gave Kaylee up for adoption? Did she leave the adoptive family who raised her without so much as a backward look? Kaylee claims that the adoptive parents who raised her, far from being abusive or unkind, simply loved her too much, smothering her with affection. She says that they were unable to let Kaylee go as she matured into an adult, having fought so hard to have a family of their own, so much so that she felt like a virtual inmate in her home. So Kaylee wasted little time leaving the family home and moving in with her when her birth mother, Sarah Mowbray, got in touch in November after searching through every Kaylee Marie on Facebook. Cozy television nights with Len, 69, and Monica, 61, were swapped with a 41-year-old Sarah for bingo, copious cigarettes, and pints of Carling lager. It's not immediately clear why Kaylee would choose to exchange the stable, comfortable home of her adoptive parents for her birth mother's comparatively chaotic existence. Before settling down with Terry Mowbray, 39, an unemployed farm worker, Sarah had a series of dysfunctional relationships and a son, Daniel, 15, by another father. Yet Kaylee is adamant that it's far better to live with her birth mother than to live with a couple whose desperate desire for children led her adopted daughter to feel smothered with love. If you had asked me what life was like with my parents when I was 15, I would have told you that it was brilliant, she says confidently. I was the apple of their eye, probably more so than Mark, and I never really noticed that because I had everything I wanted. They were quite controlling. Looking back, though, when she was 11, the first event to shake up the family happened. She claims that her brother Mark could no longer stand the strict rules of their parents, and what she describes as the stifling atmosphere at home, well, she was perfectly content. He left one morning at the age of 17 and did not come back. In the morning, he just set off for school, and we never saw him again, Kaylee says. I knew they were arguing, but I didn't realize how bad it was at the time. He said that all the time they were controlling him, telling him who he might be friends with and what he was allowed to do. He got a lift to a friend to Hereford, and that's where he's been since then. To me, it was totally confusing at the time. My parents were devastated, and they kept trying to get him to come back, but they didn't know how. I can now see that things have started changing for me too. They'd always been quite controlling, but it got worse gradually. I hardly saw my school friends, and they never really left me to play with them when I saw my cousins. My life was with my father and my mother, and that was it. Everything changed when I was 16 or 17. When I reached the age when I was ready to grow up and explore the world, they went from being loving parents to people in cotton wool wrapping me up. It's like two parts of my life have happened. First, happy, then totally and utterly miserable. Of course, there is another possible explanation for the clashes between Kaylee and her adoptive parents. Straightforward youthful rebellion. Most teenagers don't like to follow the rules of their parents, but when things at home are tough, most don't have another mother to run to. Mr. and Mrs. Watts, for their part, refused to comment on Kaylee's claims. Speaking from home, Mrs. Watts said, "We don't want to involve ourselves in this at all." Kaylee argues that the struggle of her adoptive parents to conceive left them so desperate for a family that when their children turned into teenagers and became more independent, they were unable to cope. I can see they must have really wanted kids, and at first they were really great adoptive parents, she says. When I started developing a personality of my own, the problems came when I wanted to see the world outside the family unit. They were incapable of accepting that, and until I felt I could not breathe, their control got tighter and tighter. While there's no suggestion that the couple were abusive towards their kids, Kaylee says that the departure of her brother, coupled with her maturing into a teenager, damaged the family beyond repair. Kaylee decided against doing A-levels and instead found work, first as an apprentice hairdresser and later as a care worker, despite having reasonably good GCSEs in maths, English, science, and food technology. When I was 17, when I started to see more of the world outside and wanted to spend time with different people, everything really fell apart, she says. Mom and Dad just wouldn't have allowed it to happen. I wasn't allowed to go out. I took off my phone, and I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend either. Before I got my first boyfriend, I was 21 years old. It was so different from the way I was treated when I was younger that I had no idea what to do. In my own home, I felt like a prisoner. She first tried to run away when Kaylee was 18. I was found by my parents walking to the bus stop with a bag over my shoulder. They were just grabbing me and taking me home. I was then banned from leaving the house altogether for a while. She began to self-harm, miserable and isolated, slitting her wrists and hiding them with long-sleeve tops. The feeling is difficult to explain, but the pain of cutting myself was a way of controlling the pain I had inside, she says. It was a pleasant feeling, as it was kind of a release. I know my parents thought I was being protected, but it was actually killing me. They just didn't want me to grow up, I'm convinced. They so badly wanted children, and now they didn't want to let go of their daughter. I told them that they were suffocating me, but they behaved as if I belonged to them, and they would carry on as they pleased, no matter what I said or did. It was as though all the love they had for me had turned into something awful. Like how I felt didn't matter because I was theirs, and that was all there was to it. After her parents tracked down the address and, she says, brought her home, the rose escalated and a second attempt to leave, in which she escaped to her boyfriend's home, was foiled. Meanwhile, quietly through the local authority, she had begun the process of seeking contact with her birth mother. She may have been abandoned for adoption, but she would certainly have more in common with her own flesh and blood than with her adoptive parents, Kaylee reasoned. Fate hurried things along 3 weeks later. Sarah, happily married with a teenage son by then, had spent 7 years trying to track Kaylee down and was trawling through Facebook painstakingly. Contacting adopted children in this manner is regarded as potentially harmful by professionals. But going through official channels failed to yield results, and when social services took Kaylee, Sarah, who says she was so vulnerable and just a kid myself, she was 21, decided to pursue her own investigations. The early flurry of exchanges between the pair online makes reading fascinating. Even though she was thrilled to have found her mother on Kaylee's part, there's clear reticence. Through the official adoption postbox system, a formal means for birth parents and adopted children to contact each other, they make painstaking arrangements for exchanging letters. But the communications between Kaylee and Sarah goes silent in mid-December. At this time, Kaylee says, all her communications were monitored by Len and Monica's. I was scared of them, she says silently. The conversation only resumed on Facebook on March 18th this year when Kaylee sent a simple message. "Hi, Mom, X." When Sarah asked if she was allowed to answer, Kaylee wrote, "You are, of course. Now I have moved out, so I can do what I want." They met for the first time the following day and have not stopped talking since. At a flat in Malvern, near Sarah, Kaylee had enough savings to pay the deposit and was interviewed for a new job in a care home. "I've always worked and I love the job I do, so I always wanted to get back to it as soon as I could," she says. In the end, it was easy to leave home. I went upstairs and wrote a note explaining it all, then packed a bag and went to work for the night shift. I got a lift to Worcester with a friend the next morning instead of going home, and I haven't looked back. Meanwhile, her adoptive parents were left bereft by the absence of their daughter. "It's sad to leave my adoptive family behind, of course, but I had to make a choice," Kaylee said. "My father always wanted to be in control. I told him and Mom that I was being smothered and I felt like they were locking me up. I tracked down my brother on Facebook a few days ago and we had our first conversation in years. What he asked me first was why I didn't leave years ago. It was because I never had the courage," I told him. The sad thing is that he never questioned my decision to walk out for a second. They always wanted children so badly, but they drove us both away in the end. Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video in social networks. We'll be right back to you as fast as we can.